Hey guys, welcome to Practical Home Projects. This week's video is going to be a little bit different. Instead of talking about a project that we've undertaken, this is actually about a project that I let the professionals handle, and there's a very specific reason I did that. So we actually purchased a new townhouse just a few years ago, and then had this specific plumbing issue, and rather than fixing it myself and possibly contaminating the renovation process, I let the professionals handle it, and that way the builders could reimburse me when we, let the dust settle and figure out who was at fault. So the specific problem that we're going to talk about today has to do with a plumbing leak that appeared out of nowhere, essentially. So you see in this image to the right that we saw a little bit of dampness on the ceiling of the downstairs bathroom in our house. At first, I thought that was just natural condensation, but over time, the dampening got worse, and then we actually saw some moisture on the building outside. So then we knew there was a real problem. When I called the builder originally, they kind of told me that it was my problem to deal with. So at that point, I hired a professional plumber to come in. The professional plumber charged a lot of money just to come in and kind of inspect the place. They drilled holes in a bunch of different walls, and they isolated this specific location right here where the water was coming from. And if you look closely, you'll see there's two pipes. One's the hot water pipe, one's the cold water pipe, going from the second floor down to the first floor. And at that instance, since they're going through the floor, there should be something called a nail plate. This is to protect those pipes from ever getting punctured in the future by a nail. So it's 1.5 inches by 3 inches, so it's just the right size to cover up a stud. And you can also notice in this image that that's the end of the baseboard. So I'm sure that whoever installed the baseboard put a bunch of nails right there. And we found out afterward that actually one of those nails had punctured the PEX pipe. The reason we didn't notice this right away is because PEX pipe is a plastic, it's very soft. So the nail essentially stuck into the pipe and sort of caulked itself. But then over time, the house heats and cools, it gets some water usage. That nail sort of worked its way out a little bit, and it was just dripping very slowly. We still never saw, a torrential flood. But it was just dripping enough to cause some damage downstairs. So we'll go downstairs in just a second, but just for now, realize that this whole episode could have been solved by this one little piece. And fortunately, since we discovered that they did not install this, the builder was able to cover the entire renovation process, even though it did cost a lot of my personal time. So let's go look at it. So welcome to what's left of our downstairs bathroom. Just a couple months ago, this was fully tiled, had the bathtub, had drywall everywhere, obviously, and we noticed that water leakage up here in the corner. So the plumber only had to cut out a little corner here, but then unfortunately water got behind the tile, it got behind all the drywall, got underneath the tub, and this is an exterior wall, so this should have insulation on it. And with just water penetrating all of that, in order to make sure that we didn't have a mold problem down the road, the builder had to come and gut everything. Plumbing mistakes are kind of tricky because you don't see the water until it actually hits the surface, like a drywall. So one thing you don't want to do is say, oh, I see a little wet spot here, I'm just going to scrape it off, recover it with drywall, mud, and call it a day. So in our instance, for example, we saw a little bit of water up here, but there was actually water all the way down behind the tile, right? So it actually hit this concrete foundation and it went out, so we could see some moisture coming outside. So just cutting a little hole here and replacing that drywall wasn't going to do it. And even the initial attempt was just to try to put some fans on it. But since this is like 7 feet of insulated material, there's no way you're just going to be able to pull the air out pull the moisture out just by blowing a fan on it. So they really had to remove all of this in order to make sure they got that moisture out. If they didn't, then 6 months or a year from now, these studs would start to be completely rotten, and then maybe a couple of years from now, this could actually be a structural issue and could start ruining the integrity of the house. And then actually, once they got near the bottom, they decided to take this tub out as well, just because you can't see what's underneath it. Maybe there was some other insulation kind of tucked in there that was still holding the moisture, and they also wanted to do a moisture test on the wood itself to make sure it was dried out. After they removed everything and had it gutted like you see here, they sprayed it with an antimicrobial just to make sure that any kind of existing mold can't grow even under regular human conditions. And then now it's had a couple days to dry out, and then they'll reinstall everything, including put the insulation back So if I leave you with anything today, it is don't cheap out on the little stuff. Your house probably has 200 of these things in various places. You should have one every single time that a pipe goes through a stud, and you should have one every time an electrical wire goes through a stud. And 99% of them are never going to see any use, but that 1% you're going to end up with a situation like this. And you know, this is a 45-cent piece. This is a $7,000 project just to kind of refix it. And you know, this cost me like over a month of just hassle going back and forth with these contractors. So even though the builder is fortunately paying for it, it's still a big pain in the neck for me. So don't forget all the little stuff. Definitely don't forget your safety measures. That's all for this week. Thanks guys. If you really liked what you saw here, don't forget to like and subscribe, and then we'll try to get more stuff like this out in the future. Thanks, have a good one.